many policies get created, but the execution becomes the toughest part in the entire process. So we bring in AI not just in recommending policies, but also in the execution of the same. If we can manage perception in the context of COVID-19, then a lot can be done, isn't it? We as a policy do not take up any political consultancy work, but that is us. That does not mean it's not possible, right? Many companies would take it up very happily and are doing it. Misutilization of technology, especially in this context, one specific context that you have mentioned, is very much possible even today.
Thank you for joining the Change I Am Possible, which is India's first Future Tech Meets Sustainability podcast. And today I'm delighted and honored to have with me Mr. Ashwin Srivastava, who is an entrepreneur, investor, author, and a government advisor. Mr. Srivastava is the co-founder and member of the board of Idean Ventures, a growth stage private equity accelerator with operations in India, UAE, and Africa. He is also the co-founder of people management research and consultancy firm Great Manager Institute and leads Sapio Analytics, a government advisory firm with offices in Silicon Valley, Mumbai, and London. He co-owns a global media network called Ajanta HC through Sapio and UITV. He is also the co-owner of Cancer Rounds, a virtual comprehensive cancer care hospital, and a brand of nutraceuticals for cancer patients through Princeton Healthcare. He is also a regional mentor of change at Niti Aayog, Government of India, advisor to Indian Council of Medical Research, and author of the new book titled The Artificially Intelligent Government: Stories of Impact on Governments and Citizens Using New Age Technologies. So it's a pleasure and honor to have you on the show. Really appreciate you giving time. So the intro is something which I pulled out the net. So it'll be super awesome to give a brief intro on what you've been doing and what drives you as an entrepreneur.
Thank you for that intro. Yeah, so I have been, from the start of my career itself, been an entrepreneur. Building companies, building tech companies is my passion, my work. And in the last few years, the focus has been on what we call new age technologies. So of course, data analytics, artificial intelligence. I have built a few amazing companies in the past, got exits, and that's how I founded my venture capital fund. But then I'm an entrepreneur, so building companies, building products is what I like more than anything else. So I would say back to being entrepreneur with all these amazing companies that I have. Sapio Analytics, which is a very exciting, I would say, group of companies. There are quite a few companies within Sapio Analytics, which is working towards making governments take the right decisions, make the right policies using artificial intelligence. Now, when we thought of creating it, it was totally an unseen concept. But today, many governments are using the systems that we have, and it basically functions across different departments of governments, starting from the local administration, urban as well as rural, law enforcement, intelligence, healthcare, and of course economic growth. The book which you mentioned, Eddie, The Artificially Intelligent Government, that's how it came about, because it is primarily stories of the work which Sapio Analytics has been doing, and how there is this possibility which we can see now that governments can start taking decisions based on analytics coming from data. But there is a lot of effort going towards making sure that the due importance of these new age technologies come in governance and decision making itself.
In this decade itself, almost all of these technologies which are currently in nascent stage will become monsters if we do not nudge it towards the direction which is going to be beneficial for mankind. And we need people who have got foresight to understand this revolution and leverage this opportunity, because I think almost all of the technologies are so potential that it can create huge transformation. Almost all industry sectors stands to get completely transformed, and those who do not leverage it will get disrupted. So we are in exciting times, and I guess we need people like you who are the front movers, and being a front mover, I do completely understand that it comes with the pros and cons, because you get in too early into the ecosystem and nobody wants to kind of like, use those because they feel that it's too in the future, but it's only the ones with the foresight understand that this is the future. And data, I think it's the new oil. It's the new currency, if I might say, and if we try to leverage that, I think great businesses can be built, and that's already being shown across industry. So let's start with Sapio Analytics. You said that you've been doing this. I mean, could you kind of like give a lowdown on the different subsectors of company that you have in Sapio Analytics? What actually does it do? What are the products? What are the services?
When we started Sapio Analytics, it would have been so tough, right? Now you are talking about how tough it is for people in general to understand and adapt to the new transformation which is happening. So if it is tough for general corporates or businesses, it is maybe 100 times tougher for the government, isn't it? It's like it's in a different league altogether in that sense. And then of course, having working with the government, with people who have been very integral to government. And the team of Sapio basically includes civil services officers, many of them. So it's like it's a very, very exciting group of people. So we understand government very well. When something as unprecedented as COVID happens, what do you do? Who do you fall back to? How do you take decisions? And that's where what comes into picture is the use of AI. Artificial intelligence. Now I'll come to how and what, since you asked that question. So one of the divisions that we have within Sapio is focused on economic growth. Right. Now this division basically currently is working with the government of Uttar Pradesh, government of Telangana as well, and also with government of India, where there is an entirely new policy that we have been able to create. I'll talk about that briefly also, where the idea is that can we take important decisions with respect to our economic growth using data analytics. That's the starting point of it. Now, for example, when this whole migrant crisis started happening, when the reverse migrant crisis, our job was to be on ground and collect as much data as possible, and we were getting a lot of data. And out of all the data that we were getting, the system started realizing that this can be converted into an opportunity, because people are going back into their hometowns, and maybe the economy, which has been so centralized that only maybe some places like Mumbai and Bangalore or Hyderabad or Delhi control the economy of the country, maybe it can be decentralized a little bit more using this particular situation which has happened. Now, with this, an entirely new system got created. So what we do typically, I know that we actually help create policies. So we conceptualize policies first. So this was the output which was coming to the system. It goes to our domain experts who understand policy making and everything else. And then we came up with a policy which was about system which can empower the blue collared workers. Okay, and when it's like a guide for the blue collared workers, helping them get the right jobs in the location which they want, and if they do not get such job, then providing them with the right skills so that they can take up that kind of a job which is around them, and of course guide them like a lifetime guide for them. Right, it's like an artificial intelligence guide for them. So it's a bot which interacts with them and keeps on guiding them in their language, in their manner, in an empathetic way, understanding their skills, their lack of skills, and then being able to kind of see how this part of the skill can be used in a particular job which is around their area. So on one side, our system was able to use data analytics to recommend a policy. On the other side, the implementation of that policy also we suggest should not just be in the usual way, because suggesting a policy is slightly, I mean, not say easy part, but many policies get created, but the execution becomes the toughest part in the entire process. So we bring in AI not just in recommending policies, but also in the execution of the same. So this is how this thing got created. It was launched by the Prime Minister, like through the Prime Minister's office. It's part of the Department of Science and Technology division. It's called Saksham. So Saksham is a thing which came out, and now it's becoming very prominent. A few lakhs people have been on the platform registered, and we are targeting to reach millions of lives through this. So this is an example of how on one side we bring in intelligence coming in from data to decide and create the right policy and set the right benchmarks, milestones. All the milestone planning, everything comes from data and not just out of 10 people sitting in a room and taking a decision, right? And then after that, also using technology to execute it in a way that can help the citizens directly. Under the economic growth platform, the work which we are doing with government of UP is again amazing, because it is where we have launched something called a smart digital census. Now census, as we know, typically it takes, you may be aware, maybe almost a year to conduct, or even more to conduct a proper census, and then it takes years to extract data out of it and then extract some form of intelligence out of it. By that time, things have already changed. So what is needed when we talk, and this is not just a problem in India, it's a common global problem. People talk about taking all of this data, and then it takes years to actually extract intelligence out of it. Now this whole concept of smart digital census is where data comes in real time, collected through digital processes. In real time, outputs are coming in, recommendations are coming in, actions can be taken, policies can be brought in. It's all happening as the process begins. Not just that, in smart digital census, those changes which needs to be brought in the method of collecting the data can also be actually dynamic. Which means, as the data keeps on coming in, the system will suggest now maybe you need to go to this area, or this change needs to be brought in the way you are collecting census, so that data becomes much more efficient, accurate as well in the process. One core focus of our platforms here is also on the hyper-local aspect. What happens, let's say, when you are doing these surveys or something, generally the another problem is that, okay, we take a census, okay, India is having this problem. That's good to know on an overall level. But one locality in Banaras may be having a different problem compared to one locality maybe here in Mumbai. So things are very different. And those specific unique elements of a region needs to be brought out to make the right policies. Even today, when one policy which has been recommended, currently in recommendation stage, which has come out of this UP census, is a common policy for the entire state, but its execution is designed very differently for each region. For each region, it's designed differently. Everywhere, this kind of action needs to happen, this kind of action needs to happen, because of the hyper-local aspect.
Who would have thought you would take what's a challenge and create an opportunity of that? The reverse migration you said you used and created Saksham. That's such a beautiful thing, because I think the biggest impact post-COVID was the migrations. They were completely disrupted. Though there is another side where the government says that there's no data of the loss of death or the job loss. That is something which needs to be kind of corrected and kind of looked at. So there is some great things which is happening, and I think we need entrepreneurs such as yourself who create opportunities out of these even really huge problems that we have seen. Even the smart digital census that you spoke about is so awesome. I mean, I think in another few decades, if the central government, the state government, they all come together and understand the power of exponential technologies and start leveraging it and leveraging the data, I think we'll be able to create governance that works for everyone and not just for the ones who are in a privileged situation sitting in urban areas. So there
exactly, whose voices can be heard. That's how it works. You're right. I completely agree with you.
Right. So there, in the course of conversation, you use the term decentralization. I think that's a very profound word, and I think it's a game changer. It challenges the status quo of everyone, the traditional governments, the banking industry, the traditional institutes, and so on and so forth. But the promise of decentralization is so awesome. It can create huge transformation. You have been engaging the government, introducing new policies, and also implementing them. And you're saying, I mean, the government is really open at this point in time and has accepted artificial intelligence, so on and so forth. Would the government be open for decentralization? And do you see India, which is decentralized, the powers going more to the common man? Is that a possibility, or is it too a far-fetched dream?
Whatever we are doing right now also would have looked as like something which is not possible at one time. Just imagine this. Just imagine the situation that, who takes decisions? The whole power lies in taking decisions, isn't it? So, and I'll be a little blunt here, the bureaucrats, the people who are there in power, the whole civil services and, the people who have kind of, in a way run India to a great extent, they do it, they believe in the power which they have of taking decisions, and they get involved, right? That's how they do it. Now, on the other side, the politicians who come to power for 5 years or whatever number of years, they also want to take decisions, and that's why they are there. Now, someone comes and says that, okay, you take decisions, that's fine, but I will recommend. What is it that you should be taking? Now, just imagine this situation. It's very tough for them to accept it, right? Because you're saying that, something else is needed, something more is needed beyond your existence, both of you, both these segments. But it has started happening, right? It started happening because it is giving results. At the end of the day, results matters, right? At the end of the day, what matters is there is some form of benefit happening. Now, if that starts happening, both these powerhouses can start leveraging that also, right? I mean, a government can say that they have created this, and that's why better things are happening. Both powerhouses can leverage this also. At the end of the day, nothing speaks more than the result, more than the impact. So, having said that, coming to your point about decentralization, if we see value, if we are able to show value, of course, how it will start? It will start off with some form of pilot. Okay, let's do it in some small area and show if this works or not. And if that works in the way that it is able to show genuine impact, somehow not really threatening the power, that's also important. It should not come across as threatening. It has to be very smartly designed. So people talk, so I'll tell you why, because I sit in the middle, right, of that new age tech and also on the side of government. So I could see that on sometimes the people who are working on new age tech and all this tech, they want a complete change ASAP. That also does not work, right? It has to move in stages. So somehow without threatening the powerhouses which are there, without making them feel that they are responsible for the contribution of this impact that is happening, and then when actual impact starts happening, decentralization wherever it is needed will happen.
So you mentioned threatening the power. I do not understand why that should be the point. We have created systems that has benefited us over the years. There's banking industries, they've flourished, they've made money and everything. There are so many institutions, the government, they've worked. And our vision as humans is to always create a better civil society for everyone, right? So why should be a technology which gives power back to the people should be looked as a threat? Shouldn't it be looked at, okay, this is something which is going to create a better tomorrow, so why don't I change? Why don't I move on to a system which is more optimal? Why can't we have a perception like that rather than a threat?
You understand this. That does not mean that everyone else will understand it in the same way, right? I mean, you get the idea. And then it's about perception, isn't it? Many people come with multiple perceptions about accepting certain things. And in the real world, we'll have to, our perception is not maybe the best perception at times, but may not always be accepted the way it is. So one has to find out ways in which multiple perspectives are coming together and everyone is feeling that they are part of it. That's how things can move forward. If you don't mind, I'll just give you a quick example, which is slightly again a little blunt, but I would like to share this. So when I talk to many bureaucrats also, there's a reason they say why they do not take up new technologies. They say that they are happy doing nothing, and it's nothing as in nothing too innovative, because they're afraid. I'll tell you, the majority of the people who do innovations are the ones who would be under maximum number of reviews, the reviews which are set by the governments, right, on the bureaucrats. So why will anyone then want to get under review? Because people think that, okay, why are you promoting this new tech? Why not? So people love to be doing nothing. That's the general mindset. In that mindset, if one has to bring a change, there is a lot of effort that goes into it. But yes, the right message needs to be conveyed.
Completely understand. Think for ages, all our bureaucrats, politicians have been unaccountable. That's the reason we have got governance where there are promises, but there's lack of implementation. I hope and I wish that through technologies and entrepreneurs who are brave and who push the boundaries and care for everyone, care for a better planet, I think they are the ones who are the real change makers. People like you who really are, being advocates, because I do understand how tough it might be to make the government understand the potential of the transformation of leveraging new age tech. You have written the new book, The Artificially Intelligent Government. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
The thought was to pen down the few things that we have done in the past and the people that I'm aware of who have been making some changes in the governance itself. And the thought was to present it to the world, tell the world that something new has begun. We need citizens to be aware that change is happening so that they can also play an active role in bringing that change forward. And that's why this book, which basically kind of introduces people to the power of using artificial intelligence in governments and how that can lead to an impact. And the stories which are there are primarily related to the COVID-19 crisis, because that is the biggest, that was the time, and that is the time right now also we are facing it, where maximum troubles are happening. And of course, there have been lots of failures, in this last 1 year, but there have been some good success stories. And if you look at some pockets, and these success stories have been driven by tech, it needs to come out. This needs to come out that, it is, so I start the book by saying that the real hero is actually artificial intelligence, but of course, AI is created by people. So then I mentioned the various people who are behind this also. But the idea is to make people aware that, okay, this is what tech can do. Tech can save my life. So this is what this book tries to convey, and hopefully start this message, bring this message out to the world that this is happening. It's not as if that it will maybe happen later, or it's a thing of the future. People talk about it, right? I end the book also by talking about some of the movies that we watched about governments having AI, like Minority Report and others, and all those. I just mentioned that because we talk about it from this perspective of whenever there is this AI government, then we think of some form of disaster coming or something like that, right? And that's how typically it has been projected in movies. So the idea is to tell the world that it's not a science fiction thing anymore. It's happening, and it's happening in the right way, in the right manner, the way it should be happening. And we need more people to join the movement.
This is a new beginning, and how true this is a new beginning. There is a change which is happening. And you rightfully mentioned that a larger awareness needs to be created where everybody, whether they're sitting in an urban area or rural area, any part of the country, they should be aware about this huge change, because I think internet is that tool which has democratized knowledge. And if you have knowledge, you can do whatever you want. That there's no stopping you. Today we have free knowledge available on the internet in the form of MOOCs, massive open online courses, through podcasts, through webinars, and so on and so forth. So there's a change which is happening. And so education is not just restricted to those brick and mortar institutes. The only thing that's stopping an individual today is a desire and intent. You could be sitting in a city or you could be sitting in a rural area. If you have the desire and intent and a connection in internet, you could build businesses, you could do everything, connect to people and create. So that is exciting, and I think that message should go out that every individual in this planet is capable of creating or touching billions of people's life, creating huge businesses, billion-dollar businesses, or creating change that impacts billions of people. And this is possible. So the only thing that is stopping you is the desire and intent. Would you like to share a few anecdotes from your book?
Okay, so let me then talk about Mumbai itself. Mumbai, when the whole COVID situation started, when it was not really there yet here in Mumbai, but the world was getting aware, we took cognizance of that. Our team, there was a team which worked on it. They could see, they did some data churning, seeing data of what is happening in China, what happened in Italy and other places at that time, certain European countries. And there was a pattern which was emerging that this is not something to be taken lightly. Because we were fearful that India has this habit of, sometimes taking things a little lightly, could have been a little concerning. And that's where this entire data first came in. Then we also saw the possibility of the economic impact this will create and the social impact, negative social impact this will create with times to come. So what we could see at that time, it was not just the spread of the virus. And that's where I say the intelligence of data comes in, because it was also economic impact, which would be a naturally negative thing coming in once things get shut down, and then the kind of social impact in form of crime increase, which we saw. There's a lot of data which we have which talked about how, like for example, domestic violence increased, many things increased. So there are a lot of data around it also in India, specifically. I'm talking from that context. So the thought was, okay, now we can see that there are three different things: economy, social, society, and the disease itself, the spread itself, that needs to be optimized in a way in decision making. So when we talked to various people at that time who were supposed to be decision makers, we could see that some of them were either thinking only from the context of let us stop the spread, and some of them were thinking only from the context of let us, somehow the economy is the only thing we have to think about. So, and they were thinking that, okay, they're able to think ahead, and that's why they're thinking of economy. So generally, we could see there was a gap. People were thinking from their own angle, what they understood better. That was the output which was coming out in their decisions. That's where we created a system, which was a decision support system, which was able to optimize these three parameters on a hyper-local level. For example, within an area inside Kolaba, it would suggest that these many things should be open, these many things should be closed, so that the economy is maintained, society is not impacted, and spread is also controlled. So this concept of what we called the granular lockdown plan was implemented at that time. Of course, at that time itself, which was able to lead to some form of some saving of lives. So it was actually implemented. Now this particular plan was then taken up by government of Telangana, and then they implemented it in a much bigger way. We have got letters which talks about how this was a very beneficial thing for them. So then it became more popular. The Prime Minister mentioned about granular lockdown plan much later, but he did mention about it, around sometime around the second wave or something. But the point is that this is something which was taken up by certain states, certain places, and we were able to create an impact. Genuine saving of lives, genuine saving of livelihood, both, because it was economy also that needed to be controlled. So this is it. And of course, just one quick point, I'll not name the people who were responsible, but yes, there were multiple. I told so many things about bureaucrats and politicians, but there were politicians as well as bureaucrats who were able to understand this, and that is why we could do this. So, being very clear about it.
Yes, so the best part about today is that we have some really interesting politicians, policymakers, even bureaucrats who understand the potential of technology. In fact, just a couple of weeks back, I was having a conversation with the social media head of Kerala, Mr. Anil Anthony, who's the opposition party social media head. And he is someone who's really vested in technology and understands the potential of technology. So there are these young politicians who understand that technology is growing exponentially. And if we start leveraging it now, it's not just small businesses or big businesses. Even nations can benefit humongously.
Shall I share one more quick thing with you? Not related to the book, but something which happened recently. But it's a very interesting thing. Since you mentioned Kerala, that's what came into my mind. So I got a call last Sunday from some person who came out of a very high-profile meeting with the CM of Kerala that Onam is coming, and now they have there are protests happening around opening up because of Onam, especially because of political reasons. It was open during Bakrid, so there is a lot of protest happening that it should be open, the market should be open during Onam. And the cases are increasing in Kerala. So what should be done? Now, the reason why I'm sharing this with you, I got a call who is a technology guy, which means there is this acceptance. They wanted to know a solution. Our team sat, we designed an entire solution, a technical solution on what can be done, keeping in mind all the problems that you are facing. You have to keep it open, but you have to still control it. How do you do all of this together? It was created through technology. So what I'm trying to say here, that this acceptance is coming in, right? It's not just a decision which comes out of, let us take a decision around it based on my vote bank or whatever be the reason. It's coming out of some place. So yeah.
When you talk about frontier technologies, new age technologies, we should not just talk about the positives. We should obviously talk about the downsides of technology. So people are aware that we are dealing with something which has the potential to exceed in intelligence far greater than the entire mankind put together. That's artificial intelligence, because there are people and researchers and scientists working on artificial general intelligence. Even at its narrow AI at this point in time, besides your companies who are leveraging it for great products and services and solutions, there is the social media which is leveraging it for manipulating, nudging an audience towards buying things and things like that. And obviously, everybody knows about the Facebook scandal with Cambridge Analytica and how it was leveraged to manipulate voters. Now there is a number of articles on the net which suggests that if there's a government who's going into the electoral process, artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics is going to play a huge role to create or make sure that a specific individual becomes the prime minister or the president. Though we are not completely do have that technology where we can completely manipulate, nudge a voter in a personalized and foolproof way, but we are getting over there where eventually we will be able to nudge any voters towards voting someone? How beneficial and how dangerous can these technology be?
No, Eddie, you have asked a very important question, a very tough one also, because it's real. What you are saying is very much real. It's very much happening also, okay, in certain ways. So, for example, I'll just share with you something which we did, okay. I'll share that with you. So, the whole COVID-19 situation, we decided that, especially during the second wave, that only by building the right resources and also by using tech the way we are using in decision making, the work which we are doing will not be enough. We needed to drive the perception of people to understand how important this is for them to control this. So we designed an entire perception management system which was used to make people, and it actually worked, I will not go into the depth of it, that it was able to create and change perceptions of people around COVID-19. It is not just a simple campaign which goes out like in a marketing campaign. It's much more complicated than that, because it is about understanding the reactions to certain messaging, and then based on that messaging, what kind of next message should go, and effectively building a perception. Okay. Now, sharing this with you, of course, with all your audience also, because it is public. But of course, once this is working out, there will be a number of political parties who will approach us also, right? If we can manage perception in the context of COVID-19, then a lot can be done, isn't it? We as a policy do not take up any political consultancy work, but that is us. That does not mean it's not possible, right? Many companies would take it up very happily and are doing it. Misutilization of technology, especially in this context, one specific context that you have mentioned, is very much possible even today. Now, there is no answer to this apart from the simple fact that any technology can always be used in both ways. That's the reality. It's about who is using it, what is being, because anything can. Literally, you take out, it's not just AI, you take out anything, any single thing, any technology can always be used for both purposes. Now, you may be aware of Palantir, I'm sure. I mean, Palantir Technologies, US, everyone knows the company. 65 to 70 billion dollar company now, and it has been there has been a lot of questions around it, that its technologies which help in taking decisions, it's all AI based, right? And then US government has adopted it in a very beautiful way, like it's seamlessly integrated over there. It somehow is also racist, some people claim this way. And I was on Reddit, I did an AMA on Reddit recently, and Reddit people ask lots of questions, very tough questions they ask. So someone asked me this, that the biggest problem according to that person the world is facing today is racism, and what they could see, that racism is actually not getting solved but even getting propagated further using AI, at least based on the example of what they were seeing in the US. So I gave an answer. I told that I have not made a solution around racism also yet, but then we discussed and we could see how a solution can be designed to even solve racism using AI. It can be solved also. You can know, like for example, there is this subconscious bias people have, right? And that's something very deep which exists, especially in countries like you, India also, everywhere it exists, where you think about certain communities in certain ways, and it's not something which comes out directly in front of you. You also maybe sometimes not aware of this bias which exists, but it comes out in certain actions that you are doing. Now, if those actions are being recorded, if the system is able to understand, it can nudge you towards those subconscious biases. There are multiple, that's just one example. Multiple such things can be done to start controlling racism also using AI. So the point is, the same exponential technology which you talk about, on one side may be used in a way, maybe I'm honestly not saying, because I don't know enough about the whole Palantir thing and all, whether it is negative or not, I don't know about that, but some people may say that it is being used in that way, but the same thing can also be used towards the good also, to solve the same problem which some may think is being propagated because of the same technology.
Right. Yeah. So technology is a double-edged sword, and you rightfully pointed out it's never the technology; it's the humans who nudge it towards the direction where he wants to take it. And that could, through history, we have seen that the use of technology, there are people who can use it for great things and have created huge transformation, but there are people who have used it negatively for bad things also. Since we talking about the negative use of technology, we can slightly possibly delve into the Project Pegasus, how it's the current government is leveraging that, and that is something I think which is I didn't expect something from India, because China, yes, that's valid. They're doing it for the Uyghurs. Using facial recognition, monitoring its people, and that's maybe China. But when the Indian government did it, I thought that that is a start of a loop which doesn't have an end. Are you restricted or only sharing your services to Indian states and the government, or are you also looking out for, or are you engaging other nations?
So that's the reason why we have expanded ourselves. We have a US entity as well. The US entity is not to help US, it's for various developing countries. So we have created an international entity in US, especially focused on South America. For example, Guyana is a very interesting small country in Caribbean. Guyana recently found oil. Oil was discovered there, and now it's on a new path. It used to be one of those developing, underdeveloped economies, and now it's on a new path after formation of oil over the founding of oil over there. And thankfully we were able to get very deeply connected to the government and make them realize that this new path, it's an opportunity. It should not be wasted away. New age tech has to be brought in, because you're going into something new. You're talking about becoming the next UAE or whatever. It needs to be done with lot of smartness. So just as an example, I'm saying Guyana is there, and then various other developing economies. We have been talking to various countries in Africa and other countries in different parts of the world. We have initiative. We have recently appointed two managing directors also, global and overseas, responsible for different geographies that we have.
Right. So Ashwin, paint a picture for my audience of what this decade or the future of governance is going to look like, and how deeply will governments, at least here in India, will start leveraging new age technologies.
10 years is such a long time. I'm very confident that India, because we will, us as citizens will make the governments more accountable towards adapting technology even more, which means definitely in majority of the departments, decisions will be taken based on what data is saying. And of course, data is something which can easily be manipulated as well. But I'm very confident that if we bring in, what we do, it's not just data analytics, but also, some amount of self-learning in the data, so that, it's controlled from biases and etc. etc. So basically, I could see, and I'm foreseeing it. I'm genuinely foreseeing it. It's not a utopian vision. I'm foreseeing it that governments will start taking decisions for the people, because it is the people who are creating that data. It's the citizens who are creating it. It's not just a few small lobbies or certain powerful people or certain segments, certain central bodies. It's the people in general who are creating data, and they are saying what is the decision that needs to be taken. Of course, their voice, typically we say that people's representative are their voice. Now I'm saying that technology will be the voice of the people. Tech is going to be the voice of the people, even more than the people's representatives who are going to be part, of course. But tech is going to be the voice of the people, because it's directly coming from the people to the system. Right? So effectively in 2031, I can see a world, especially, from the context of India, where the focus will be on citizens in general, and they will be the ones actually in power through tech driving it. Now, it's very tough. It's a utopian world, what I'm talking about. but I genuinely believe it, and that's what I am working towards. So that's the kind of world which I want to create as well, isn't it? So of course I will believe in it, believe in the possibilities of such a world being there, where this is how decisions are being taken, and of course we'll have a lot of smartness through this. For example, today COVID led to so many issues in the healthcare ecosystem. We could see how much of a problem exists when it comes to optimization of healthcare resources. We saw it firsthand. We could see it very clearly, and this is something which needs to be solved. This will be something which definitely will be solved. Where again, and another one thing, people think that there is a lot of money required to bring in tech. That's again a misconception. Rather, tech can save money a lot in the process, and that's what I believe will happen. That we will see a better world in that sense, that okay, maybe India will not have, every village of India will not have one let's say PHC, a primary healthcare center, but it will be connected. The people will be served. Maybe a virtual PHC will be there, if not a real PHC. And that's if we try to make, okay, India will have one PHC in every village, it will not happen in the next 10 years. It's not possible practically. We don't have so much money anyways. We are in so much of debt right now. It will happen only when we realize that the same vision can be achieved by bringing in tech, where virtual PHCs can exist in a very beautiful manner, in which a hub and spoke kind of a model connected to a central location, where a lot can be solved using tech. And this is what will happen, where the realization will come in that it's not just we need high-end tech and money to actually do what we are trying to do, but most importantly, it's about the people in the most interior parts, what we call in India, being much more empowered. That is something which is definitely going to happen in the next 10 years, because that's where the real change will begin from. So that empowerment of the citizens, not just limited to people like us, but to everyone, is something which I expect will happen.
Right. We need more entrepreneurs such as yourself who think like that, because it's only and only when we handhold the underprivileged and take in everyone, we can create a truly global superpower in a nation which will create innovations that will challenge everyone. And yes, I do hope that we get into that world. And you said so rightfully that tech not necessarily has to be expensive. It is something which will add not just value, but it will actually save money. It's the opposite of what people think. People think that the technology is expensive, but I guess all of these technologies in the next couple of years, artificial intelligence, 5G, augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, blockchain, is going to converge. And once it converges, the benefits is going to be humongous. And I hope that the listeners who are listening in understand and try and go towards that direction, because to create a better future, I think technology will play a huge role. My last question to you, since you are vested in artificial intelligence, you've also written a book. I had a conversation with the Chief Information Officer of Estonia, and I had posed the same question to him. Do you see an artificial intelligent Prime Minister or President of a nation?
So Eddie, the problem is that this is public, right? So, and I sit on committees of the government also, so I have to be very careful in whatever I speak, right? Because I represent parts of the government too. Not necessarily in that, I'm not sure about that term, whether it will be called that, but very much possible, at least in spirit, what you are saying. That's what I'll say, right?
I'm excited for the future because there is so many wrongs, and today we have the opportunity to correct the wrongs. And we need entrepreneurs who have foresight and who want to create a better world. And it only can happen if we join our hands, are collaborative, and create a governance which is participatory, and we involve everyone. Today, I think we generate 2.5 quintillion bytes of data every single day. Now, even if we kind of take that data and infer something from it intelligent, I think every business sectors will see huge transformation. So I'm excited for the future. Thank you for being part of the podcast and sharing insights on what the future of government could look like. Wish you the very best for you, your company, and the new book. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Bye bye. Thank you. Thank you, Ashwin.
Thank you, Eddie. Thanks a lot.